Hello and welcome to the latest in our Saturday Spotlight series of interviews. This is Anna Amelia from North East Animal Rights, and I would like to welcome today Cleve West, who is an award-winning garden designer, animal advocate and author.
Hi Anna, nice to meet you.
Thank you very much, and likewise. So we're going to go straight into the questions, if that's okay with you. So would you mind talking to us about your vegan journey, how it started, at what age, and how did you evolve?
Yeah, well, I was vegetarian for quite a long time, since my sort of early 20s. So it took me ages. I was 56 when I became vegan. That was 6 years ago. And well, I suppose our family are largely vegetarian anyway. And there was one vegan in the family, my partner's, my wife's daughter. And she's been vegan since she was 13. So I don't know how she put up with us, to be quite honest, all those years. But she brought up twins vegan, and they're now in their early 20s. And it was only when the other daughter's son went vegan on his own at 12, it made us all prick up our ears. And I don't know what was unusual about that. It's just made us think a bit more seriously about it. And that's of course when we thought, oh, we'll do it to support him to begin with. I still didn't really get it at that stage. And it was only when I started seeing films like Earthlings and Dominion and all that. I mean, it was a horror film. It floored me, to be quite honest. Absolutely floored me. I had no idea what I'd been buying into over the years. Yeah. So it was quite drastic, quite a shock.
You talked about you were vegetarian first, and I think I was exactly the same. I mean, I was vegetarian from the age of 14 until about 13 years ago. And that seems to be, kind of like what I thought was I was doing enough. Was that the sort of situation with you as well? You thought you hadn't made enough of a change?
Yeah, I think I went vegetarian for health reasons. I wasn't even thinking about animals at that point. We're so bought into that idea that animals are well looked after and humanely reared and killed. And it seems bizarre to think about it now, but health reasons to begin with. It's only since I've become vegan that I've really thought about it from the animal's perspective.
Yeah. Now, you've written two books, Our Plot and The Garden of Vegan, and I know, obviously, from researching you before the interview, you're a multi-award-winning garden designer for. You've done all sorts of things at the RHS, the Chelsea Flower Show, and I've seen some of your fantastic designs. They've got loads of tips and advice and technical expertise and practicalities. With the links that, as mentioned in the subtitle of your book as well, about the animals, the planet, and our health, being guardians of them. So how much do you think we've got a responsibility as gardeners to the environment?
Yeah, well, it was while I was advocating for animals, going to vigils outside slaughterhouses and stuff, I suddenly thought, I'm in a profession where we should be taking care of the planet anyway. And so that's where the seed for the book came from. But when I think about it, in fact, since being vegan, I think as gardeners we can potentially do a lot of damage. And we disturb habitats. When I go in to design a garden, 9 times out of 10 you should do a lot of clearing before we actually do any building. So that's quite a lot of disturbance to habitats and insects and mammals and birds and whatnot. So I've had to sort of recalibrate my thinking about gardening and what we're actually doing, what we're trying to do. And I even got to a point where I thought, I don't want to do this anymore because it's actually having a negative effect on the planet. But then you've got to think about, well, if I don't do it, someone else is going to do it, and they're probably going to do it far less sensitively than I will. So I had to sort of try and rethink about, we're human beings, we are sort of vectors in this world, we do disturb things, we go about our daily business and unknowingly harm things. So we can't be blamed for that, but we can be more thoughtful in our interactions with the landscape. And this is what I'm trying to do now. And I don't pretend to have all the answers, to be quite honest. I know it's work in progress at the moment. But certainly if I'm thinking more about it, I can be talking to my clients and get them to think more about wildlife. And most people are actually interested. It's just trying to get them look a bit deeper and consider the smaller things, the things you don't necessarily see. They're sort of the key to all this.
Presumably your clients, though, they know that you are a different type of garden designer, so one which is going to be taking more care of what you're, a bit more thoughtful about what you're putting in and how you're clearing things. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I hope so. I'm sure I've probably frightened quite a few off with my social media accounts. But certainly the ones that are getting in touch with me. I mean, some people don't know. Some people don't look at social media and they get in touch and I start talking to them and it's clear that they haven't seen any of my stuff. So, but then when I start talking to them about how I feel about gardening now and the changes that we need to make in order to protect the planet a bit better or leave it in a better state, some of them are actually quite on board with all that. So I think there is a general feeling that we are messing the planet up big time and we need to be doing some things to help sort things out. A lot of people just don't know how to go about it, so they need some help.
I mean, you talk about messing the planet up there. I mean, I remember, everybody will have little sort of anecdotes about how during lockdown, the plants and everything and started coming back. So we kind of think if we weren't here, the planet would probably heal itself. So I suppose what you're talking about is it's correct, it's right. It's the planet will. It's what we are doing. It's the damage we are doing, really, isn't it? Which is the issue.
Yeah, really. I mean, during the lockdown, we were allowed to use our allotment. So right from day one, we were very lucky to be able to go down there, and so we appreciated all the things that people were looking at. We knew about that anyway, but it just accentuated it about 100 times.
Yeah.
But then, we have quite a relaxed sort of style at the allotment. We sort of let things grow. Weeds grow if they're not in the way. We just let them get on with it. But it's amazing how quickly nature does take over. And after 2 or 3 years of this now, we're suddenly in a position where I've actually got to do some clearing, and I don't feel like I want to do it, but if I'm going to grow any food, I've got to. So funny situation.
Yeah, you just mentioned before when you've talked about your journey from being vegetarian to veganism, and then you mentioned about saves and things and vigils. So how did you get involved with that? Because that's quite a leap from going from being vegan and being a garden designer. How did you who got you involved in that? What did you see to sort of?
My stepdaughter sort of recommended some films like Earthlings to watch, and I saw that, and Cowspiracy, Forks to Knives, I can't remember what it's called now.
Forks Over Knives,
yeah, Forks Over Knives. And as I was saying, that really hit me between the eyes. I wasn't prepared for that, and when I saw it, I just thought, I've got to do. If I'm not going, I'm going to go mad if I don't do something. So I just went online and saw Facebook, and Earthling Ed was in his sort of early days doing his videos. I saw those. There was a vigil that popped up in Farnborough, only about 45 minutes from where I am, and I thought, well, I'm going to go to this. I don't know, and I was driving down the motorway, really not wanting to go. I thought, what the hell am I doing? And met a great bunch of people, and since then I've gone to quite a few different vigils and saves, and I don't know if it does any good, but if it just makes one person think about it for a day, then that's good enough for me. It's trying to find the time for doing that sort of thing is getting increasingly difficult, and I haven't done so much lately. I'm hoping to go to another one soon in Guildford, but I think it's good to, even if you don't have time to do one every so often. It's good to just keep the fire stoked and just make you remember about who the key people. I refer to animals and people sometimes, but who the key people are in this whole mess of a world.
Yeah, we had one. We support a group called Northeast Animal Save, and they did a save yesterday up in Burradon, and it was sheep going in yesterday, and there was an awful picture of sheep heads and skins, obviously with no bodies inside, and they were all just thrown into a big sort of bunker, and that kind of like hit home quite dramatically, and obviously it was very, very upsetting. And then we had footage, like audio footage of the workers on the kill floor shouting at the animals when they were getting pushed towards. No. So I think as animal rights activists, it's something that we have to do, because it makes us stronger, I suppose. We can speak the animals' truth, because we know, we can kind of cut through all the humane slaughter myths. But I think we've also got to be careful with ourselves as well, that we don't desensitize ourselves to them, you know,
Yeah,
because they are very traumatic doing them.
it's incredible that.
Mm.
It's interesting you mentioned that desensitization, because that has happened. You know, you sort of do desensitize. I mean, it's really self-preservation, to be quite honest. But as long as you can maintain the focus, and that's why, you know, having a gap between going to some of the saves is often quite good, because it suddenly reminds you just how hellish this whole system is.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's one of the things is we always say is that until you do these things and you come back into the real world, or the world which is happening, and you can't understand how people just don't get it. You just, just literally just, hands up, eyes shut, and just don't get it.
I mean, I'm sure that if you took someone to one of these, say, just looking at the eyes of these creatures looking out from this should be enough to make anyone go vegan.
Yeah. So going back to the garden part now, and we've got a very keen gardener in our group, Leslie. She works very hard. She's got a massive allotment, and she tries to work veganically. At the moment, she's currently experimenting with. She uses our rabbit waste. She says she comes around every now and again, and it's saving loads of space in our bins, because we're putting all the hay and the straw and the rabbit poop, for want of a better word, into the big bags, and she takes them away and she puts them in trenches. And then she puts the soil on top, and then she puts the plants in. So have you got any other tips for, like gardeners, amateur gardeners and allotment holders? Are there any easy wins, or are you experimenting with anything yourself at the moment?
Yeah, I'm experimenting at the moment with I tried green manures, and I'm basically, because I've got a business to run, I've got an allotment to look after, doing animal stuff as well. There's never enough time in the day, so I find that green manures is just a step too far for me. There's so much extra time involved in trying to get that system right. So what I'm doing now is no dig. I mean, green manures work really well if you're organised, but because what I'm trying to do is garden without any animal inputs at all, just to show people it can be done. And so we're trying to garden more in a no dig technique. So we don't dig the soil at all. You cover it with cardboard as a barrier to keep the weeds down. Then on top of that, you put compost, a thick layer of compost, at least 2 inches of that compost. And then you plant directly into that. And by the time the cardboard is rotted down, the roots are going down into the soil, the worms are loving it, and you don't have to disturb the soil. So it's a fantastic system. We've got a little bit too much by way of pernicious weeds like couch grass and bindweed. Yeah. So it's taking a bit longer. But Charles Dowding and Stephanie Hafferty are the two sort of leading exponents of no-dig gardening in the country, and it's worth looking at their videos. They're really informative and fantastic. It's really inspirational. So yeah, that's what we're doing at the moment, and it saves you back as well. You don't have to do so much digging.
Well, I'm not sure if I want to tell Leslie or not, actually, because that means we have no way for our rabbit poop to go.
But you can have a separate area for that as well.
But yeah, I think she'll find that absolutely fascinating, because she does spend a lot of time there. I mean, she gets a lot out of it. And we have Alan as well, who's one of our friends of the group. He does a lot of, he's got his own allotment. And we see that the stuff that they grow is completely different to what you get in the shops. It's so much better quality, and different shapes and sizes. Kind of like what I remember when I was a kid. When my dad had his allotment and greenhouses.
Yeah. No, they're fantastic places. We love it.
So those of us who aren't gardeners, is there anything that we should be doing, we can do it ourselves, which are quite easy and not very technical, to help animals and the environment? For example, I mean, we know there's bee attracting flowers, but is there anything else we can be doing?
Yeah, there are all sorts of things you can do. I mean, the thing is trying to feel your way through and trying to make life more interesting or trying not to disturb things if you don't have to. And I know that's really difficult in a garden. There's certain things you have to disturb and just to get in and out of the garden. But I'm looking more at doing habitat piles. We have, at the allotment, for example, we have wood piles that we've made like little low walls where we know we're not going to grow anything. And it's sort of, I mean, this is the designer in me coming out, dividing off spaces so we can have a table and a place to eat. So areas that are really shaded and not where things that aren't going to grow, you can put log piles of twigs, and they're great habitats for all sorts of creatures, invertebrates, and even some mammals as well, and birds. So we've been doing that at the allotment, and I'm trying to encourage clients to do that more in their own gardens. So it's a quite hard sell sometimes, especially if they want to use every inch of the space. But quite often, some of these forgotten areas are the most vibrant in terms of life forms. So that's what I'm trying to do at the minute.
Yeah. So we know you've won many awards at the RHS, and it's something which I've retired last year and a half, and one of the things I want to do is to go down to the Chelsea Flower Show, because I absolutely love seeing it on television. It's so amazing, and I just sit there and I'm just. It's just like a feast for the eyes, isn't it? And I can imagine when you're there, you can smell everything, you can see, and you can touch everything, and it's just great. So, how do you find your inspiration for these when you're putting entries into these events? And can you talk us through the process from your plan part of it, and actually through the exhibiting?
Yeah, it's quite a process actually. It's a bit like having a baby. A lot of people say this because it's at least 9 months preparation, but quite often, sometimes it's even more than that. And I've been lucky enough to, in the past, to have had like a good 18 months to think about it. But quite often, the inspiration either comes from a personal experience somewhere, or a memory, or even the garden that you've done before, that where you couldn't get everything your own way, and you thought that was a missed opportunity, so I'll do it at a show garden. So because you have to remember that show gardens are like theatre. They're not real gardens, so they exist to be perfect for that one day, and after that it's all torn apart. So that's another big thing in my mind, is like, should we even be doing them, with all the resources that we use and waste? Should we be doing these if they're just going to be lasting for a day? And I think there is a movement now within the RHS to actually address that. And there's something called Project Giving Back, where someone's put a load of money in for the next 3 or 5 years for charities to build gardens, and they can then be repurposed after the show to somewhere where others are going to benefit. And I think that's a really good idea. I mean, if I ever do another one, it's the only way I think I would do it. I wouldn't do it just solely for one sponsor, just to get them lots of advertising. So I'll give you one example. One of my favourite gardens was a garden we did for the Telegraph, which was based on a memory I had of a visit to Libya. This is before Gaddafi fell, and we had a great time. We visited a lot of the ancient Roman ruins. We went to one particular one called Ptolemy near Benghazi, and I put my design in for the Telegraph. It's a sunken garden with these lovely sort of sculpted columns, which I'd seen, very modern looking, but coupled with a very sort of traditional way of building. And when I put the design in, I suddenly realised that I looked back at some of the old photographs of this Roman site, and basically it had sort of sat in my subconscious for like a couple of years, and it manifested itself in this garden. So that was really spooky. So that's one way of getting inspiration, because it's very difficult with a show garden. Normally you're just presented with a blank page, and you can do anything, and that's the worst thing. Normally with a garden, you've got a tree over there, you've got a view over here, you've got a house, you've got all sorts of things to spin your ideas off. But a show garden, you've just got that blank page, and it's really scary.
Yeah. So I'm thinking, obviously there must be a lot of money spent on producing everything. So how does it work? Do you get, does somebody sort of ask you, they're paying you to do this, and they obviously advertise, and so how does anybody benefit financially from it?
Yeah, so the sponsor pays for the garden. The RHS, they don't charge anyone for the garden. That the space is allocated. You put a design in, and it either gets accepted or not. The sponsor then has to fund it, so they have to fund the build of it, they have to fund the taking down of it, and all the publicity that goes around it. So it's a massive. You're talking upwards of £250,000 upwards.
Yeah.
It's a ridiculous amount of money to spend on a garden that's going to be there for 1 week, but the amount of publicity they get for that 1 week and all the TV coverage is actually worth it to some of the sponsors.
That's what I was going to say. It's kind of like they're not actually getting money back as such, not directly. It's advertising, kind of advertising. Yeah.
So their name is getting said, every few minutes, and it's prime time viewing all week.
Yeah. So do you have a favourite style of landscaping or gardening, and are there any trends that you are following at the moment, or do you set any trends? I mean, are you aware that anybody sort of has changed things that they're doing because they've seen what you've done?
Oh, I wouldn't say I'm a trend setter. I do see the trends, and some of them I like, some of them I ignore, and I often think that if it's suddenly trendy, then it's probably time to move on a bit. But I don't know. I think you just move with the flow sometimes. In the early years, I've always liked sculpture. I mean, because I did art as part of my degree at college. So I've always liked sculpture. And in the early years, I worked with a sculptor called Johnny Woodford. We did some great gardens together, but they didn't really relate. They didn't really transfer into real gardens. So I had to work on my own after that for a while. But and now, of course, everyone's going to more natural gardens, wildlife friendly gardens, which is brilliant. And I'm into all of that. And always have been, to be quite honest. But it's nice that people are taking it a lot more seriously now. But I still like sculptural, and especially at Chelsea, if it was something where you want to show off a bit and be noticed, then it'd be rude not to use sculpture in a garden.
Mm-hmm. So you talked about, obviously you're very, very busy and you find your time squeezed, but you are still trying to do some animal advocacy, should I say. So do you have a particular interest, like an area of interest within animal rights, for example, vivisection or farmed animals, or you've mentioned the safes, obviously, which is farmed animals. Mine, I would say mine is probably dairy and chickens, because I've had chickens and I see sort of, what they go through. Is there anything particular with you?
Yeah, it is farmed animals mostly, and you're right, dairy and chickens. We did a lot of chicken saves up in East London. There's a slaughterhouse, I think it's still there actually. It's not going to be there for much longer. But I'm also aware of the time it takes. Standing outside a slaughterhouse for half a day, and you've got to get there. And, who's going to pay for that day? And I've got bills to pay. So I try and do some of that, like I said earlier, to keep the fire stove. But I'm also trying to do other things within my industry, I think everyone's got interests where they can probably be more influential.
Yeah.
And for me now, it's in the garden, particularly with Kew Gardens and the RHS. I'm on their case quite a lot in terms of trying to get them to shift to plant-based food, and that's a big project for me at the minute. And I just keep nagging them. Eventually, earlier they weren't talking to me at all, but now they're actually talking to me and they're getting quite excited about it. So I've worn them down. And then after that, trying to do, and this is something everyone can do, is to look at the work that Feed Our Future is doing in terms of getting local councils to get primary schools to serve plant-based food. This is really important, and this is something every single person can do. Write letters to your councils and get in touch with them, try and find out if they can do that for schools. And even, I think, several councils are now serving plant-based food only at their events. Yeah. And this is something I want the RHS and Kew to do, but everyone can do this with their local council. Yeah. Really powerful, and I think it's going to snowball.
Yeah, I'm working on a charter with our local council. It's called an Animal Protection Charter, and one of the things within it is about an increase. At the moment, it's if I said we want only plant-based food, it just wouldn't even sort of it wouldn't register at all. So at the moment, we're looking at having majority plant-based food at catering events. So people have to almost ask for the meat options, rather the animal options, rather than the other way around, where we haven't asked.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. There's lots of psychology involved in that. Apparently, if you only have a couple of meat options and you put them right down at the bottom of the menu, people are more likely to go for the plant-based option.
Yeah,
really interesting.
And the primary school stuff, this week I'm actually in a primary school talking to, I work with Animal Aid doing the school speaker programme. So I'm talking to children about climate change and how it impacts on animals, animal agriculture, commercial fishing, that sort of thing. And it's really, really good to get the children to talk to children, because they're so, open-minded, and obviously their natural instinct is to be kind to animals. So it's very, very easy to get them to understand. It's easier than it is to get the adults to understand sometimes, Adults are so much set in their ways.
No, definitely. I'll tell you one thing just quickly. Talking to these people, Feed Our Future, about the work they're doing, trying to get councils to engage with this, is that children do have anxiety. They're going to grow up with anxiety about climate change, and when some of them find out that animal agriculture is not only as horrific as it is, but it's actually causing a very uncertain future.
Yeah.
There's going to be anxiety issues for schools. So there's so many different reasons for getting these councils to make sure that primary schools get plant-based food.
Yeah. You talk about that anxiety. I think there's going to be an awful lot of anger as well. I think probably in 20 years' time, we're going to have a lot of these 20, 30-year-olds looking back at us, saying, what on earth were you doing? What did you do? Why did you allow this to happen? You know, so we have to keep on doing this for them. So how do you feel veganism is progressing within the UK? And do you think that there's anything we can do as individuals to progress our cause?
Yeah, I think it's doing pretty well. Obviously, COVID really has sort of, I think, maybe upset it a little bit, because I think what I've seen is a lot of divisions have come, you know, with the anti-vaxxers and you know, and I mean, you know, vegans are just humans like everyone else. They always have arguments, and I can't bear all that stuff going on. You know, my focus is on the animals, not people's preferences and choices. So I wish that hadn't have happened. But on the other hand, COVID is, you know, we're going to get more pandemics basically if we carry on intensive farming. I mean, that's just without a doubt. You can't dispute that. So that should be a good enough reason. So I'm in a way, it's horrible that it's happened, but I'm glad it's happened as well, because it's hopefully it gives us a better argument for putting a stop to all this intensive farming.
Well, right at the beginning of the pandemic, Viva were doing the 3 and 4 campaign about 3 and 4 zoonotic and 3 and 4 emergent illnesses were coming from animals, and it was quite heartening to see last night. I mean, albeit 2 years later, but on Channel 4 they did a big article on 75%, which is the 3 and 4. 75% of illnesses emerging now are coming from animals. So you feel as if finally 2 years later it's starting to be talked about on mainstream TV. And these are things which we've been seeing for a long time, you know. I mean, not just a couple of years ago at the pandemic start, but for years. Of
course, and then you've got the antibiotic whole thing's going to happen soon. That's the next thing on the horizon.
Exactly, I know, exactly. I mean, that was actually mentioned in the Channel 4 article about the number of antibiotics which were used in the animal industry, and the fact that they're not working, and we need to find another solution. But anyway, I suppose it's better that it's talked about, you know, now rather than not at all. But we just need to keep on. I think keeping the pressure on, and you know. So what's next?
There's a lot of willful ignorance, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. There's an awful lot. There's an awful lot of people just sitting with their hands over their ears and over their eyes.
You can't get away with it if it's on. I mean, there's one night we were watching TV from a distance, and we suddenly thought, hang on, did we just see 3 vegan adverts in a row? Like, what's going on?
I know it is. It's amazing. I mean, I know it's Veganuary, but actually my husband was saying, once you start getting plant-based adverts, or adverts where people are saying go vegan for whatever reason, you've really cracked it, you know. And I think I feel as if we're cracking it rather than cracked it, because you can still be sitting at night time, and it's quite a bad night if you don't see a vegan advert, because there's always something on now.
That's right.
And that's kind of like gone from like a couple of years ago when there was literally nothing.
Yeah, I think if you're doing it for the animals, it will never be enough, will it? Because you just want it to end completely. Yeah. But you have to keep thinking that compared to what it was like 6 years ago when I was first vegan, it's just gone, you know, complete full circle almost.
Yeah, it has. Yeah. So what's next for you then?
Well, I don't know. I think I still need to try and do more for animals, you know, with the RHS, and, you know, with in the gardening world, and more people are getting in touch with me. And occasionally I'll put a post out, and people, and I'll get more gardeners get back in touch saying, yeah, we're vegan now and we've been thinking about it. So I think I'm in it's a good place to be in terms of engaging with people. I'm sure I lost a lot of followers to begin with. I think loads of them just fell off, but I think some are just creeping back now. And what I want people to do is actually talk about it more. People say, oh, I'm vegan again, but they won't sort of become advocates or activists. And I think it's probably a big step for some of them, you know, if they've heard, you know, it can be difficult for vegans to be vocal. But it's actually getting a lot easier now. People do actually engage with it in a positive way. So I'd encourage anyone who's not active, to just, you know, just do something in your own, just don't always have to get out of your comfort zone. You can just do something within your circle, and just keep it small and tight, and just see where it leads.
Yeah, very wise words. We say you have a moral obligation to do activism if you can. You know, as a vegan, otherwise you're just plant-based. You must, if you're vegan, you have to advocate. But it can be within your own comfort zone. It could be social media sharing or petitions or something like that. Yeah. But thank you very much. That's been really, really interesting. That the time is just absolutely flowing there.
Good, thanks, Anna.
So thank you very much for talking to us, and we're going to sign off now. So I'm going to say this is Anna Amelia from Northeast Animal Rights, saying thank you very much to Cleve West for talking to us today.
Thanks, Anna. Thanks so much.
Okay, thanks very much, and goodbye, everyone.